It is the first museum that we believe existed in modern history. The Ashmolean was founded in 1683.
1683, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that makes it certainly the oldest museum in Britain, certainly. And it was founded in 1683 as a proper museum. That was part of the actual agreement between the person who gave his collections over, Elias Ashmole, and the university. And it was described as a museum. And at that point, there had been no other museums in Britain. And so we have our claim to being the first museum in Britain. We believe we're also the first museum in Europe. And if that is correct, then that makes us the oldest museum in the world. That's right. I'm actually, in terms of my employment, I'm employed by the University of Oxford, both as a museum curator and also as what they call a lecturer in Greek numismatics. All of our professors at the university are called lecturers, and so that is my title. I actually teach students, both undergraduates and graduate students, about the history of Greek coinage. And that's my primary, that was what I was originally brought to the university to do. But over the years, and certainly over the last 10 years, I've been actively involved in redeveloping the Ashmolean into the museum that it is today. Transforming museums is about what you can do to modernize your museum, to make museums look far more approachable to the public than before. The Ashmolean Museum 10 years ago was a very traditional museum. And we had visitor numbers that were very modest, only about 385,000 visitors a year. But over the last 10 years, we've done a complete transformation of the museum, both in terms of the architecture, but also in terms of the way we display the collections and the way that we actually address what the public want out of museums. And in that sense, we've transformed the museum from a very traditional establishment into a very modern museum, which nowadays attracts over 1 million visitors a year. And so the theme of my talk is to basically go through the thinking that went behind transforming the Ashmolean. And I'd like to just give the audience here, many of your colleagues in the National Museum and elsewhere, an idea of what you can do to change a museum. Yes, and I think that nowadays museums are universal. Museums are, the whole practice of what is good practice in museums is something that can be applied in any country you're in. And so I think it's very relevant to be able to look at the steps we took in changing our museum and give others ideas of what they can do to change things. I think in many ways the National Museum, the displays are already in a very, very good state. The displays were done not too long ago, and there's a continuous program for improvement and change, and that's a very important ethos to have. But there may be some ideas which may be influential as continuous change takes place in this museum. And I do certainly hope that our experience can be a model for other museums. Well, I think this is, of course, a very good first step. I think that our museum professionals can certainly be talking to the staff here, and what we are doing right now is a very good example of the opening of communications. But in truth, we haven't had much to do with Korea yet, and I'd like to see that improve. And I certainly would like to see more collaboration. Our museum is actually very poor in terms of Korean objects, so there may be the chance in the future to look at exhibitions. I certainly want to get more people from the National Museum over to Oxford to look at what we've done, but also perhaps to even work with our collections. And we do have a very strong Eastern art collection, but I think that they can certainly help us understand what we do have and perhaps even improve our knowledge overall. So I do see this as the beginning of hopefully what will be a nice long collaboration, because I'm very impressed with what's happened here. And there are many areas of our museum practice which overlap with practice here. And I certainly know one area of very good collaboration in the future, which would be in object conservation, because this museum, the National Museum, has outstanding object conservation facilities. We have developed our object conservation department in our museum to a very high standard, and object conservation is universal. And I think that that's one area where there should certainly be plenty of exchange between Oxford and Korea.